will join, and we'll be able to make things more than just a report from one person on the committee by the time either Thomas shows up or Janice does. So today is Wednesday, April 20th, 2010, and we're the Los Angeles Trade, Commerce, and Tourism Committee, and I'm the Vice Chair, acting as Chair, Bill Rosendahl. And in comes Mr. Bernard Parks. We're delighted to see him walk in the room. But can we go through the items, please? Sure. Item 1.
Under item 1 is consideration of a motion by Han Labange, introduced on February 9th, proposing that the Convention Center, with the assistance of the Police Department and the Fire Department, be directed to report with recommendations for banning raves at the Convention Center. Now, the Convention Center General Manager has submitted a written report in response to this motion.
Okay, we'll hold that until Janice shows up, since that's her motion on that. Do we have the proper people from the fire department here that can address that issue as well? Good. Okay, we'll just wait a couple of seconds when she shows up for that. Item 2.
Item 2 is continued consideration of the Board of Airport Commissioners' resolution proposing an amendment to the Administrative Code to allow the Executive Director of Los Angeles World Airports the ability to authorize multi-year contracts for amounts up to $150,000 per year and contract terms up to 3 years. That would be a maximum contract amount of $450,000, and that currently requires approval by the board.
Can we have a report on that? I asked a lot of questions last time. If we got answers to that, I was the skeptic in the room, so I'm assuming that my colleagues will support this if I support this.
Yes, and I'd just like to mention that the CAO has submitted a report with recommendations for amendments to the LAWA proposal.
Okay. CAO, where's CAO? Would you talk about your amendments, and I'd like LAWA to respond to it?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Hiltzman.
Good morning.
My name is Bill Kreitz.
You're doing all right, Bill.
Thank you. My name is Bill Kreitz. I'm with the CAO's office. And if I can just briefly review the changes that we recommend. We recommended a couple of things to this ordinance. We recommend that a sunset clause be implemented that would allow this ordinance to expire after 4 years. We also recommended that there be there would be an optional renewal clause that would extend the expiration date beyond the initial 4-year period, with the approval and at the discretion of the mayor and the council. We also asked that there, or recommended a provision be included that would, where this would...
Just note that the Madam Chair has arrived, so we have a quorum here. Keep going. We're on item 2.
Bill Rosendahl beat me.
I know, it's rare. We admit that.
Wow.
I did. Go for it.
Good morning, Ms.
Good morning.
We also recommended, thirdly, that the ordinance apply solely to the Los Angeles World Airports at this point. And it could be applied to the other proprietary departments, the Harbor and the Department of Water and Power, at the discretion of the mayor and the council, and with the agreement of either or both of those departments at some point in the process or at the conclusion of that 4-year period. We also recommended that the World Airports submit a quarterly status report to the Board of Airport Commissioners on the number and the dollar value of the contracts that would apply or be where this provision would be used. We also recommended that the World Airports submit a report to the mayor and the council at the conclusion of this 4-year period. And we recommended also that the city attorney incorporate these recommended changes to the ordinance.
Madam Chair, we're on item 2 about the opportunity
Right.
for the board to move forward.
Right, and we've continued this a couple times because you were the ones that had issues. So I just want to make sure you got your...
I'd like to hear from the chair of the Great Commission, Michael Lawson, and his reactions to it.
Thank you very much, Councilman. This is very important for us because there are so many things going on at the airport, as you two know probably more intimately than anyone else. And it really takes up much too much time when we're dealing with dog food contracts and things of that nature that are essential, but really don't necessarily need to come before the board. This will help streamline that, basically the activities of the board, give us time to focus on the more important aspects of it. And we welcome the change, the amendments of the CAO, recommended by the CAO. The transparency issue is essential. We want reports of all the contracts that are that would be approved by the executive director.
So under this new idea, you'll be regularly updated on what these contracts are?
Quarterly.
Quarterly? And you'll just see a list of all the ones that she's already approved?
Absolutely, quarterly, if not monthly. We'll have to decide on what we do, but no less than quarterly, we'll get a report of all the contracts that she's approved, the amounts, and so on and so forth. Because it's up to us to understand exactly what's going on. So that won't be a problem.
And what role will the city council have, or this committee have, in this new process?
I'll defer to Sampson on the technicalities, but my understanding is that the city council, this won't affect the contracts that the city council has to approve, because at this point in time, you're only responsible for approving certain contracts that come through the board, not all of them. The dog food contracts don't become.
Well, right now, anything over 150,000 or longer than 3 years must be approved by the city council. So now, we're giving the executive director authority to approve anything 450,000, right? Or less, and 4 years. 3 years, and 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. And it does not come to the city council. That's correct. Well, I mean, another thing I would say, I mean, again, I think this makes sense. It's a recommendation that's come from the airport. We want to be flexible. We want to certainly to, as you said, there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike in terms of how we keep this airport moving. I would think we could be afforded the same courtesy as the commission by seeing a regular update of quarterly review of these contracts that are approved.
I'll support that.
Yeah.
That won't be a problem at all.
Yeah. Because I think you want more eyes
Yeah.
and more oversight on what's going on. I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be great, but down the road, who knows where it's going to
Compliment
be.
the chair's positioning on it. We
Yeah,
will
I
not
think
hold it up.
Right.
And that's the whole point of
Right.
this, is to move it quickly.
Right, but we would like to see
fresh eyes.
fresh eyes looking at
Absolutely.
these contracts, making sure, I
Absolutely.
think that would be, it gives us more of a partnership in what you're going to be asked to just look at.
We have absolutely no problem
Yeah.
with that at all.
Okay, can we make that happen?
Yeah, and as we said, Madam Chair, that this expanded procedure authority not apply to professional service contracts, and that
Right.
the sunset clause be 3 years rather than 4.
Okay.
We have no problem with either of those positions.
The CAO, did you want to explain why you recommended 4 years?
Yes. The reason that we recommended 4 years was if this is a 3-year cycle, in other words, if we're giving the general or the executive director in this case authority to approve a contract for up to 3 years, our logic in going with 4 years was it would allow them 2 cycles. This year for any contracts that go 3 years, and next year another cycle of a contract that would go for 3 years. So it would give them actually 2 cycles to review this, rather than, because if we do it for 3 years, and there's a contract that goes for, let's say, $450,000 for 3 years, they're only going to be able to do that 1 year if we make.
Okay, I didn't major in math, but 2 cycles of 3 years each is
Well,
6 years.
well,
So
what I
if you
meant was-
ended at 4 years, they're only in their second cycle of 1 year.
Right. Well, it's this year for 3 years, and then it's
Right.
next year. For
Right, but you
possibly
wouldn't know
3 years.
until you wouldn't know.
It
Well,
would give
okay.
them 2 years, one
Right.
for 3, and then 1 for 3 added to the second.
And are we saying sunset to get rid of this policy, or a review?
More of a
Our
review.
intent
I
is
think
to-
we should use.
See, I think the sunset
Good
has me trouble, because I think if and then we would have to do it all over again. Why wouldn't we rather just see a complete review of this policy as opposed to a sunset?
There, if I may,
Yes.
There is included in here the option for you to renew this for an unspecified period of time, should the review come back and be viewed as positive on the part of the council and the mayor. So if you think that this, after after Lavo reports on this, and you find it to be, or they find it to be, or we all find it to be effective, then you could renew this for any period that you'd want, 5 years, 1 year, 10 years. That we put in here so the council would have the authority to, the sunset clause basically brings it back for review, and you, as council members, would determine how effective this has been, and if it has been effective, then you could allow this to go into the future as long as you decide to do.
We can do that anyhow, as council policymakers, so.
That's absolutely true.
So why don't you just do what the chair just suggested? We'll come back for a review every 3 years and see where we go, rather than that, okay?
So at the end of 3 years, so it would be the first cycle.
There would only be one cycle.
Right, I mean, the first
Correct.
3-year cycle.
That's correct.
We would ask the commission
Yeah.
to review it. How's it gone, how's it been going, and then we would extend it.
Sounds good.
Review would make a report to
Right,
this commission,
right.
absolutely.
Because again, I think it's the instability for contractors and vendors dealing with the city of Los Angeles. I think I've heard that from a lot of our departments. The outside folks who want to do business with us, it gives a little bit of instability that, you know, we have one policy where the executive director has the authority and the leadership, but they're not sure, is it going to sunset in 3 years? Is that policy going to go away? And then are we going to get back to this bureaucratic process of every contract having to go through the board and the council? So I think if we want to look like we're open for business and we're lean and mean and we, you know, believe in these projects, I think the sunset sends kind of a bad message. So I would rather say review and then ask the commission to make the formal recommendation that it gets extended.
So,
Okay.
So moved, and we have
All
a
right.
unanimous group here. Madam
Okay.
Chair, if we could,
Wait a second,
Yeah.
just sat down and. you
We're
said,
happy to
"Yeah,
have you,
I
Tommy."
got it. Just give me a second if I missed this
Sure, you
vote.
can
Hi,
have a second,
hi.
but while you're getting it together, I'd like us to go do item 5 with Mr. Parks in the room, as privilege to him to discuss that issue next.
That's fine. Who's running this meeting?
You are.
Thank you. Okay, so we just took item 2, Tom,
Yes.
and did you have any questions on 2?
10 seconds.
Okay. This is about the executive director having the authority to approve contracts up to $450,000 for 3 years, as opposed to what she's been doing, which has only been able to approve contracts up to $150,000. The commission,
Supporting.
thank you. Okay, so now we have unanimous support of item 2. And is
you.
Mr. Parks in the room?
You got a nice
Thank you.
Okay.
for your appearance.
Okay, so let's go to item 5.
Under item 5, motion Parks Perry, introduced on April 8th.
Morning.
Proposes that council
Yeah.
request Los
Every vote
Angeles
counts.
World Airports to provide a briefing on the background and current development of a request for proposals for a terminal
More respect that
concessions
you
manager
were able to get that.
for the theme building, the Tom Bradley International Terminal, and Terminals 1, 2, 3, and 6 at LAX, as well as to report on the timeline for the RFP process from public release through evaluation of proposals and award of the contract.
Yes. Thank God. That's all I got to say. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councilmember Parks. We're glad you're here. We know that this is your motion that wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the idea of the developer model for our concessions. And obviously, our intent in redoing our concessions was certainly that we bring more LA-based companies, we have more LA flavor. We really liked the first round where we saw companies, women-owned, minority-owned companies getting equity piece of this concessions. We want everyone to win as we go forward. So you had some concerns, rightly so, and we're glad that we're talking about this in this committee today, is how does this developer model actually achieve some of the goals that this council intended in the new concessions overhaul at LAX? Would you like to?
Ditto. Let me just
Yeah.
comment that you and I sat on the Board of Referred Powers, and we learned more than we ever wanted to know about concessions in the city of LA. But one of the things that came out, I think, very clear was the LAX put together a theme about the taste of LA. And I think that theme carried through on the selections during the Board of Referred Powers. The thing that was, I think, surprised to all of us, one company actually provided equity partnerships as part of their proposal, which has been somewhat different in the past. People were looking for minority and women-owned businesses, and many times just in name, as opposed to looking at them for business opportunities. So we were pleased with that. And as we went forward, we also found that there were a number, we tried to find out what the history of some of these companies, were they just proposing this for LA, or did they have a history of it? I had a meeting with the general manager and staff and to talk about the development model, because I think it's one of those things that we not lose what we've gained. Subsequent to our Board of Referred Powers, the one package that was sent back has now come back, and they have continued this whole issue of the taste of LA and the issue of equity. In fact, two of the subcontractors that we reviewed now are being recommended to be a prime, which is a major step, which is why we were concerned about local businesses getting an opportunity to be, if they're a small business, they become a medium size. If it's medium size, they become a large. So two of those businesses that were being reviewed and did not get selected as part of a larger package, they then went together and on the package that went back for review, they're now primes. The other, one company also took the lead on equity partnership, and I understand about 30 to 40% of their package upon selection is equity partnerships. So they carried that through. So that's even more of a reason for the review of the developer model. One of the things that, in talking to the general manager, I think kind of her explanation and the issue that somewhat reduced my concerns was that the developer model does not allow that developer to have a interest or be a vendor within their own operation. So they have to, they're actually there to bring in a group of vendors, but they cannot have a partnership or ownership. They're basically managing the vendors. The other thing I think that they brought to my attention was this whole issue of bringing forth their schedule of vendors has to be approved by airport, so they get an opportunity to see this before it goes into play. So if they bring a package of vendors
Really?
and it doesn't cover the taste of LA, then it's something in which they can go back and say, we agree with 2/3 of your proposal, but we don't agree with the other. The other area that they covered was they're going to have in the RFP these developers to give a historical perspective of what they've done in the past, regardless of what business they're in, to show they have attracted local business and how have they helped local business become bigger business. And so those are the kinds of safeguards that they're put forth. The other issue that they covered was they're going to ensure there's diversity in local businesses. And so that's the kind of thing that we wanted to make sure of. They've covered all of my concerns, and the one issue, which is kind of unusual.
I know.
But they covered all mine. But the one issue that I was concerned about on the equity partnerships, they covered in the fact that it's inconsistent with the model for the developer and one of the vendors to be in business together. But they have found in talking to vendors, they felt that they get a better and a more of a ability to apply. They don't have to be part of a team. They can come in and bring their own product forward. Plus, the airport has a bonding mechanism if it's something that's needed for financing. So they've covered it. I just thought it would be important that this committee hear what they've done, because just that word developer, and I think we've even changed that now. What do we call it?
Yeah, it's Terminal
Commercial
Concessions Manager.
Whatever, we get an acronym for that.
Right.
But the
He's-
issue is,
he's him.
it's important that we,
Turner Classic Movies. You can't do
Yeah.
that we can't, it's important that we not have this finalized and then find that these
Right.
issues weren't addressed.
I think
And then
that's
we're
right.
not pleased with the outcome, because they're going to be there 10 years with a option for 5. And so that's,
I think you're
could be
right.
15. So that's why I asked this, and so I just thought it'd be important that we all hear that.
I think you're absolutely right, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. It sounds like all your issues and concerns were addressed. I want to hear from the airport to see if he's really telling the truth. That's really the way this is going to work. But I do think that's important. Yesterday, we were all out at the airport at a press conference talking about the economic impact of what we're doing in modernizing LAX. And it's a huge impact, and we're creating a lot of jobs. We're modernizing this airport. But one of the key pieces of modernizing this airport is certainly not just the new structures and the new facilities. It's really about the passenger experience, and there's no greater impact on the passenger experience than the concessions that happen inside an airport. And what we're doing, I think, is really significant. So let me hear from the airport staff to give us an overview of everything Mr. Parks talked about in terms of how this is really going to work, and are these issues going to be addressed. The LA flavor issue, the partnership equity issue, and tell me how that works as Mr. Parks described it, that the developer, you have actually first right of refusal or approval of the vendors that they bring in. That's a piece that I wasn't clear on.
Okay. Debbie Bowers, Deputy Executive Director, Commercial Development Group at Los Angeles World Airports. We welcome the opportunity to explain this because we're pretty excited about how it's going to work. And one of the reasons is because of the business opportunities that it's going to create for the local vendors without having to partner up and go through some complicated joint venture process with a larger company. First, we went and investigated and toured a lot of the major airports that have this developer model, including Baltimore Washington International Airport, Philadelphia International Airport, Boston Logan, Pittsburgh started the whole
yeah.
process. Houston International, Intercontinental, also has it. So we've talked
To Salt Lake?
no.
No, okay.
We talked to the airports there and went through and also got all their contracts. So we're not reinventing something or inventing something. We are using the best from all of their experiences and their contracts to try to implement this bigger and better than it has been done anywhere else. One of the things that I got excited about as I toured these is talking to the airports and some of the major players that are developers in this industry is the success stories of smaller firms. Especially ACDBEs, but women-owned, minority-owned companies. And some of them have stories of where they have started a business or put someone into business in a kiosk. Mm-hmm. And they now are, and it was a women-owned business, and that lady now has stores, not just kiosks, in many airports around the country, even in non-developer type of airports. So we have set the RFP up so that when they come in, they have to explain to us how they are going to select their tenants. They're going to have to explain to us how they're going to implement an ACDBE program. And they're going to show us what they have done in the past. Now, we have already done some research, and we know already that they do meet their goals at most of these airports. And every goal that we've seen so far or talked to the airports about exceeds what LAWA has been able to accomplish in the direct leasing model. So we're pretty excited about that. The way that it is set up, it's not a first right of refusal. We approve. So we'll have approval rights over any tenant a subtenant that they bring into the airport. Besides that,
But if you don't approve it,
then they won't be able to bring that
And
tenant in.
who on the airport staff makes that decision?
We haven't set up the committee yet, but obviously it always goes up to the executive director ultimately. And so we have implemented this in other areas of the airport.
Like what?
Advertising for one. No advertising goes up without going through a committee and getting
Right.
approval.
Right. I mean, I obviously, with Bernard's concerns and of course many of our concerns, I like that idea. It makes me a little nervous in terms of streamlining the process, and we know what it takes for the developer to get vendors and get tenants and sign leases, and going through a committee process. Hopefully, I'd like for you at some point to come back and tell me how that's actually going to streamline this process, because you certainly don't want, out there in the retail commercial marketplace, couple months where it has to go through a committee review. You might have lost your vendor or tenant at that point.
Well, and I can explain initially when they're trying to put the whole program into place, it's going to be even more simple because they have to come in and have what we're calling a development improvement plan as they take down space in the terminal. So when they come in with that, they're going to come in with their whole host of all their subtenants, and that process will have to be approved and approved pretty quickly because we have timelines on LAWA.
Yeah.
Because it
Right.
comes into, it's an approval process for that and for the construction and the development, and we have strict timelines that we have.
What
on
other
this
things are you going to look for their vendor besides LA Flavor? What are some of the things you'll either approve or disapprove on?
Well, we're looking for local businesses.
Right.
We can't require them,
Right.
but we are looking for that. That will
Right.
have a lot of effect on our decisions.
Right.
Obviously, as many ACDBEs as we can put into there,
Right.
because we're trying to encourage that. Then, of course, looking at how they lay it out in a terminal and see that they have put people together that will encourage sales across different units, that they have thought through the process. We are also going to be looking for performance. So if it's a small company that's performing outside of the LAX, what have they done? How did they start their company outside of LAX, especially a local company? We're also going to be looking at the developer to tell us how they're going to help that person or help the public, the traveling public, to understand these exciting small companies or local companies they may not know about. So it's very important to us of how
I
they
get this. I think this is going to be a very interesting process. It sounds extremely subjective. And going through a committee makes me even more nervous. I would like to see this process, tightened up a bit, because everything you just said was we will encourage, we're looking at, we hope they. So I don't know how you approve or disapprove based on hopes and encouraging and we'd like to see and wonder how they did business here, and because I think I think at some point your terminal concessions manager. This is a different model than direct leasing. I can see all those criteria in direct leasing, but you've got to give the authority to this terminal the developer model, or you're wading in the weeds a little bit, in my opinion, too much. But maybe I just don't understand that process. Do you have any questions on this process?
First of all, I'll make a comment and get a reaction, and I'd like to ask my colleague a question. To be clear, any concessions will have an opportunity to compete for various terminal spaces available once a terminal commercial manager is selected. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So all we're doing by selecting a terminal commercial manager is deciding who will be in charge of developing the space, but we are not deciding who will actually operate those stores.
Correct.
Okay. Once the terminal commercial manager is in place, will LAWA, you said this, but I'd like to hear it again, have a voice in the selection of the concessionaires that will operate the stores?
Yes, we have final approval of any concessionaire that will come.
So the next time we see this item at TCT, it would presumably be to consider LAWA's selection of the TCM for those terminals.
Correct.
Okay. Now,
But at that point, you won't know necessarily the vendors.
yeah, that's exactly right.
That's
So,
correct.
all right, we picked the group, we picked the developer model person. Then what if somebody pitches that developer for their particular opportunity and get rejected? do they have a process that they could come to or should come to, or how would that work?
I can see it now.
Referred policy.
Board of Referral.
That's,
I can see this now.
There isn't a formal process that we've set up yet. The developer or the TCM is going to, part of the criteria that we will be judging them on is the process that they plan on implementing to select the concessionaires. So when they give us that model, and which will be negotiated after we have approved it, we're going to make sure that in that selection criteria, there is some opportunity for LAWA to have input or to understand at least some criteria why they would reject someone. That never precludes someone from coming to us and explaining their circumstances and us having
I
a
think
conversation.
the other scenario is if you guys reject them based on this weird criteria. That's what I think we're thinking. You know, they're a viable company that the vendor wants to put in there, and then for whatever reason, you guys don't approve them. Then I see.
That's why I went
Then
and
I
checked and asked
see.
you, Mr. Parks, your thought on that.
Yeah.
No, I think that, as you see, this is a work in progress.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be issues as to a company that, like I said, pitches themselves and not be selected.
Yeah.
Where do they go? And then
Right.
when LAWA steps in and says,
Right.
you do not have the array of businesses that we believe you can get, those are all appeals that I would think LAWA's going to have to figure out how to address those.
Yeah.
And I think also, one of the things that I think part of them looking at the array of businesses is to ensure that every terminal doesn't look identical. So they're looking for ways in which every terminal may have a different experience. In fact, you may comment on one of the new terminals where the person has replicated Farmers Market.
Yeah.
That's one that's coming.
Yeah, that looks very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. One of the ones that we'll be bringing forth to you shortly, hopefully, is for Terminal 5. And the vendor that we have chosen for the food court there, which is the McDonald's that's tucked away. So we really needed something interesting, and that was a destination. And they have pitched the farmer market and to actually replicate it, including we have heard from the farmer's market we can put a replication of the clock tower. And so I'm hoping to get that out in the terminals,
Very cool.
you know, so they can know that there is something very interesting in this corner. So we're very excited about it.
Very cool. Mr. Molina, you look like you.
I just wanted, Mike Molina, Deputy Director, External Affairs. I think the issue of selection and non-selection is an important one. The beauty here is that we have 10 airports in the country that are our guides, and
Okay.
we're pretty confident that this issue's already come up. So we will go back and explore how they deal with
Right.
it in our sister airports, and then come back and provide to you a pretty accurate timeline as well as the process so that your questions can be answered.
True. I agree, but every other airport is not L.A. And it's not L.A. people and businesses, and we're unique.
Testers.
And, yeah, we're protesters. Mr. LeBon,
I
do
just
you have
want to
some
say, is there
comments?
any mechanism to say that a percentage should be companies that are based? Is there any mechanism to have a percentage based in Southern California?
By federal law, if I understand correctly, Sampson has left, we can't require it. We can ask for it as a goal.
As a
And we
goal?
are-
Now, how about for women and minorities?
Again, it has to be a goal. We can't
Goal,
require it.
can't do that. All right, I
Right.
got that. Okay. The other thing, too, I also think there should be, if I was, I'm going to say this now because I ain't going to be. If I was mayor, I would, okay? I would have a shuttle. I would have a shuttle that loops LAX and gets you into Westchester. Whether it's in and out or some of the dynamic little places on Sepulveda, that's a little commerce. And then you're tossing out a little commerce to the neighborhood that's impacted. That's a thought, or other neighborhoods to the east that are close that you're 10 minutes away that you think, oh, if I got 3 hours in between flight, let's go to a neighborhood. That's just a little thought here. And I think it's good to use those LA landmarks to try to make people enjoy and give. And also, you might have to make it real simple, because I don't want board of referred powers here. These things, if you're going to move and make it right, you're going to have to do it within with a period of 30 days, as Janice said. And somebody will go someplace else, you know, and they'll move or whatever the business is there. People want a safe airport. They want to get at the curb. They want to get in through TSA. You fix that, you make a lot of people happy. They'll fly through LA. And then also, you want to have that experience. And is it illegal to have foot massage there?
No,
Okay,
actually,
so
we
put a lot of foot massage in.
Okay.
Make people happy.
Make me happy, I'll tell you that.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, I want to thank Mr. Parks again for bringing this forward. We definitely want to pay attention to this. We definitely want to see this concession model reflect Los Angeles on a number of levels that you've brought forward. So thank you. So the next step, I believe, is you're going to release the RFP for this terminal concessions manager. I'd like to hold this motion in this committee and receive an update once the RFP has been released. And
terrific.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Okay, well, now what item are we on?
Item 1. The raves. Do you
The
want-
raves, okay.
Under item 1, motion Han Labange, introduced on February 9, proposes that the convention center, with the assistance of the police department and the fire department, be directed to report with recommendations for banning raves at the convention center. The convention center general manager has submitted a written report in response to this motion.
Well, thank you. Colleagues, Tom Labange seconded my motion, and I introduced this because I was very concerned about having one of these raves that I believe draw so heavily our public safety resources away from so many other issues to an event like this. And of course, we were all horrified at the 15-year-old girl who died from a drug overdose. And again, I think I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about free speech and not being able to ban certain kinds of music or whatever. But I'm looking at this as a total public safety issue. These kinds of events, while again, our number one goal is to keep the public safe, why would we want to book an event that we know will draw, again, heavily from our police department, our fire department to go to sort of service this one kind of event? Again, drawing resources away from the rest of the city. We only have a limited a number of police officers and firefighters and paramedics. Again, during budget times, we're looking at closing engines and reducing staffing. So I was just concerned and want to know if this is a policy that we actually could adopt at the convention center. So, convention center staff, or maybe I listen to Chief Gannon and tell me if I'm on the right track on this idea.
Well, unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience with the raves this past year, and you're absolutely right, Councilwoman. It takes a tremendous amount of resources.
Identify yourself for the record.
Deputy Chief Pat Gannon from Operations South Bureau. And it uses a tremendous amount of resources in order to police it appropriately and properly. The raves itself, I don't know if I want to get into necessarily the banning aspect of it, but I definitely want to talk about the risks involved. And recently, after the Electric Daisy, which was the death of that young girl, which incidentally is not the first death, nor has it been the only death since then, as related to a rave event. There was a young man, a USC student, that attended a 2-day event at the Shrine Auditorium back in September, October, who participated for 2 days, went back to his dorm room about 5 o'clock in the morning after spending 2 days at this rave at the Shrine Auditorium, and took a leap out of a 6th floor window there at USC. He didn't die, but 6 floors, he crushed every bone in his body. The call that USC had to make to his parents who lived in Colorado, who had dropped that freshman off just a few weeks prior to enjoy his freshman year in school, was an absolute tragedy, and that young man will not be the same. In a number of other discussions and meetings, especially those that had occurred at the Coliseum Commission, there were a number of young people that came in that had their lives had been tragically altered as a result of ecstasy use at rave events that testified before the commission, as did a couple of parents. All of that is a tragedy. The unfortunate part of this for us is the amount of drug use that does take place at these events.
Does it take place at the event or before they go in there, they get a
Combination of it. So that they will take it just prior to the event, so the impact of the drug impacts them within the event. If the event lasts for a long time, for example, if you have it starting sometime, we were starting the Electric Daisy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it went until essentially 2 o'clock in the morning. They would use it multiple times within that time period, and that is very dangerous according to the health professionals. But that concerns me greatly. So at all rave concerts, just from the narcotics standpoint, I was putting nearly 50 narcotics officers out in the parking lots in the surrounding areas in order to deal with these particular issues. For Electric Daisy alone,
What drugs do they take?
Ecstasy is the drug of choice for that, and based upon my own experience, it is a drug that is that heightens the experience with the lights and the type of music and the smoke, and it all works together to create an experience that is apparently an incredible high for these young people. And I've read hundreds of blog entries on from people who attend raves, especially after the Electric Daisy. I just wanted to know what people were talking about and how they were feeling. And it's they all had a great time. I mean, you're talking about blogs where people just had an unbelievable time. But the constant theme through it is the use of ecstasy to enhance that piece of it. That's where it becomes dangerous. And in the past, for Electric Daisy, there was over 100 transports to local hospitals. I think it was 114 transports. Now that has been cut down because of, in recent ones, where they've allowed a MASH type unit or a cooling down room, or it's more like a quasi hospital setup within the event. My concern on that is it just masks the issue and masks the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. There have been some good things that have come about as a result of this. The LA County Board of Supervisors commissioned a study on this, not as to whether to ban raves, but if they did occur, what were the recommendations on how they should?
Well, let me ask you that. If we were to book one at the convention center, what kind of resources would you deploy for? It looks like, like how many hours,
Well, I think one of it, for me personally, it would depend on the size. If we're talking taking over the entire convention center, both sides of it, multiple stages, and for that, it would be a tremendous drain on resources for us, and we would have a tremendous footprint outside the venue also, because with this comes as many people for Electric Daisy that were inside, there were thousands of people outside the venue. This music is so loud. I joke that the same song played for the entire day. I couldn't recognize anything different. But it's clearly a music that people love, and you can hear it clearly outside as well as you can hear it inside, probably better. But it draws a lot of people into the area, into the neighborhood that don't have tickets and no intention to get in. The security for getting into the convention center is much easier to secure than it would be fencing at the Coliseum.
All right, I appreciate that, Chief. Let's hear from the fire department. How do you view these kinds of events, and what resources from our fire department would be utilized?
Mark Storms, acting fire marshal. Our staff at the Fire Prevention Bureau has been working with PD on all of these events. It affects both the fire prevention side, which is the folks that we have in for crowd control and to assure that the event is carried off in a safe manner, but it also has months of planning where fire and police both attend meetings to develop plans and event action plans on how we're going to address it, so there's an impact there as well as the staffing of that day. The other issue is that we have emergency services providers, both fire and EMS type, that we have to provide to the event. We can put a certain amount of that cost back on the event, as like Chief Gannon indicated, those hospitals. That's one of the recommendations that came out of the EMS task force from the county. And they did a very comprehensive, it was a very good task force, a mix of promoters and the EMS side, fire side, police side, and they took a real hard look at it. And but that financial impact cannot be underestimated, that we will be impacted along with the hospital care delivery system. That's an impact that you don't necessarily see right off the top. And as well as when the event is over, all these folks are on the street. And that can carry that EMS impact and that police impact outside the venue onto the streets. And in fact, the impact to the neighborhood is both before the incident, during the incident, and after.
I mean, when you look at this, after the Electric Daisy event at the Coliseum, 226 medical emergencies, 114 people taken to the hospital. If you looked at that under any other circumstance, you would consider that a major disaster had happened.
Right.
You know, transporting 114 people to the hospital. I mean, that's like some major disaster just happened. And as you said, we're cutting back on trauma centers. Yeah. We've gone in the county from 22 trauma centers down to, I think, 10 or 11. So this whole trauma safety net within LA County is crumbling away. Martin Luther King has been taken, out of, the realm of.
I agree. The stress on the system is very measurable.
Yeah.
And
well, and I'm just saying, when the Coliseum's full for a USC game, how many people you average transport there? I mean, there's that's a number. Do you have a to compare how way out of
I would be extrapolating it, but I would expect it to be somewhere about 25% of that number.
Right.
But you have a college game that is happens to be a warm spell. That's going to create more of an issue for us. If it's the marathon, if it's a warm day, that can create an issue. But you can plan for that, and what you can't plan for is a surge in a drug-induced situation where you've had a bad drug delivered or an overuse of the drugs that we have somehow slipped past the system of security, and that all of the promoters are trying to put in place. But as much as that you can, dealing with the social network and their efforts to overcome our strategy to keep it safe.
Do either one of your departments have a financial cost analysis of the department's resources after that?
For Electric Daisy, the police department spent $300,000 in resources. No, nothing.
How about the fire department?
I don't have the number for you, but I know that our initial resources are reimbursed and cost recovered from the planning.
And have you been reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no mechanism in place for the police department to.
Well, let me get to the convention center. What is our? Do we have a policy in place now if we were asked to book a rave event at the convention center?
Good morning, Philip Hill, Assistant General Manager, Chief Operations Officer, Los Angeles Convention Center. Good to see you this morning. The convention center hosts over 400 events a year. To date, we have never hosted a rave, and therefore we have no income at all from a rave-type event. But we do have something, which is the large dance and concert events, which would be the closest analogy.
What if you were asked to book a rave, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes. If we're asked to book a rave, our process is pretty straightforward. What we do at that point, the first step is we look at the history of the promoter, and we actually contact the other venues to see what happened and try to understand what were the impacts on the region. Secondarily, then we move into consult with our public safety partners, which would include LA Fire, LA Police Department, City Risk Management, City Attorney. Once we have agreement on all those processes, then we move into a licensing phase to license the event.
But we don't have a city policy that you would refer to in booking an event like that.
We do not. We just consider it another one of the large dance and concert events. We do understand the specific risks that are behind the raves, particularly, really when it comes to the drug use, the drug of choice, which is ecstasy, and the impacts in a venue and
Right.
environment.
Let me ask the city attorney, could we put a ban on booking raves in city facilities? Is that legal? City attorney?
City attorney, please stand up. Are there any attorneys in the house?
There you go.
Come on up, come on up.
Airport attorney.
If you're-
No, no,
can
no.
you ban people from flying into L.A. if they're going to a rave in L.A.?
Now, can you, is that something we could look at doing, is creating a policy to not allow an event like this based on not the type of music or the type of people that come, but purely based on what we just heard in terms of diversion of city resources in the fire department and the police department?
I would have to research that issue. I'm not up to speed on this
Okay.
issue. Mr. Pete Echeverria is the one that
Okay.
does this, but I can tell you that at least for
Okay.
the First Amendment issues, you cannot ban a specific type of music. There are plenty of cases.
I'm not talking about banning music.
State Assemblywoman Fiona Ma made a motion to ban raves in the state legislature, and
Drafted a bill.
right. And she, I talked to her on a number of occasions about it, and I think she has backed away from that based upon she didn't think it was that they had the legal authority to ban it. So she might be a good resource to talk to as far as for some guidance on that.
Right. Well, again, for me, I have a real concern in the city of Los Angeles at a city facility based on what I just heard this morning. Look, we have tough budget issues. We are short-staffed. We're limited resources. It's a huge drain on our public safety resources to facilitate an event like this. I've never heard of an event quite like this that takes this amount of resources. So on that basis, colleagues, what I'd like to do is direct city staff to develop a citywide policy on rave events. And maybe, again, we can look at having a criteria that when you start to look at these criterias, if there is a certain thing that does not sort of measure up for what we in the city would like to see, then maybe you have a policy that you refer to that you don't book this event. And it's not based on music or anything else. It's based on the amount of resources that it would require.
Well, instead of saying a rave event, any event that would cause additional staffing by the fire department and police department due to the nature of the event.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
Now, I just got to tell you, Janice, I take my son who's 12, driving down the street, I see the big ad for your big XXX show at the convention center, and his eyes cheat up there and look at it, and I think, we have big, what do you call it? What's the name of the show?
There are various types. Adult Con is one of the shows.
Adult Con, that's what it is. I got that, okay? There's First Amendment rights. We can't block that. Does that cause any problem to anybody?
It does not.
Do you hear any complaints?
We do not.
So on that issue there. So there's,
Yeah, we're not
I
talking
understand.
we're not talking about content.
I got it. So, but
We're
so don't
talking
call out
about-
raves, call out a event,
Yeah.
I think. Because if you
Right.
call out raves, they
Right.
could say you're picking on me.
Right.
And-
Look, and it's risk management. I mean, we're always trying to figure out in this city, how do we manage our risk? And certainly, there are liability issues I can see down the line with events like this. And we get tired of being in closed session in city council and having to, pay millions of dollars for events or things that were staged badly and people got hurt. So this is about risk management. This is about our resources being drained. So I would like for us, city staff, to come up with a policy in cooperation with city attorneys staff on how we might look at, as Tom said, certain events that we would
Any event
that we could prohibit from coming to the convention center based on this idea of our resources and risk management. I think that's smart. I think that's common sense.
All right, I'd like to comment. Fire department, you said you get reimbursed.
We get reimbursed for our Fire Prevention Bureau staff. We can get reimbursement for key overhead positions, but our line officers, we have the same problem LAPD does. You get to a certain point where you don't have the ordinance to charge for those field resources.
Okay. Would an ordinance help you? Because frankly, how much money did we spend, supporting the rave events?
Well, $300,000 for the for Electric Daisy is what it costs.
Right.
If it could qualify as a BOSS permit, and then there's a cost recovery mechanism already in place to be able to do that. If part of the recommendations would include that, that would help work.
Frankly, from my end, the recommendation I want to make is that those kinds of events that we get reimbursed, and that deal is cut with the promoter prior to the event, and they don't do an event unless they're going to pick up the tab. Can we process that and bring that back and move forward with this? Because what that will do is two things.
Well, maybe that is a part of the report that
I
comes
really
back
think
on
it's
the
something
policy.
I want to move on quickly, because anybody who's a promoter of a rave event, if they know there's costs that they have to pick up, which are the police and fire, I think they'll either think twice or they might restructure themselves or whatever. But I just think it's the right thing to do, is not burden the entire taxpayer base on those kinds of events. If they make profits, which obviously they make significant profits, we should have all of our costs recovered. And is there a way in which I can say, let's get that back quickly so we can create an ordinance and get a revenue stream? How do we do that?
To be honest with you, I don't think we need an ordinance if one is already in place and we can use that the current existing BOSS permit process to make that happen.
On what you've done before.
It wasn't specific enough, and it was so new at the time, the permitting process, that it was only being used to impact street closures and those types of things,
Right.
and when we could put the BOSS permit in the process. But if that could be amended to include large events that have a big impact on police and fire resources, I think it would.
Do we need to amend it?
I would believe it would be. I'm not an expert on the entire. We'd have to have somebody from CLA's office.
Okay, well, we'll make that a part. But colleagues, reimbursement is one issue. A drain on the resources of the actual police officers and firefighters is another issue, in my opinion. I would much rather see these police officers, other places throughout the city, keeping crime down and protecting, Angelenos. I mean, it's our number one priority to protect anybody that comes within the city. But it's not just reimbursement for me. And in terms of the fire department and paramedics, I mean, 114 people being transferred. Now, all those weren't paramedics. A lot of those were other services. But one of the stories I hear from paramedics is, you cannot turn over these patients until, there's a whole process once you get to the hospital. Sometimes it's a couple of hours. And then you're in, and some of the hospitals are now not taking them. So now you've got our paramedics driving all over trying to find a hospital that will accept them. So now you've got paramedics that are off, the scene for hours. So to me, reimbursement is one thing, but it's also an incredible, again, deployment issue, in my opinion, taking resources away from other, parts of the city. God forbid we had an incident at the airport or the port, when one of these events was going on. So reimbursement is one thing, and I think we ought to amend this permit to make sure that you get that reimbursement. But to me, it's a bigger issue. It's resources being taken away from other parts of the city.
For Electric Daisy, it was 505 police officers that we used for those 2 days.
Were 100% of those officers on straight time?
All those were paid for, and they were taken out of Operation South Bureau after.
On straight time, not on time and a half.
No, all straight time. They were on duty.
Because you do like events at the Coliseum, because then officers could work for the Coliseum.
Well, there are some officers that work off duty inside the venue itself. Right. So depending on the type of venue, it would be the number of officers. But to support the effort outside, for a typical USC game, we run 125 officers, around 125 officers for that.
Yeah.
For the good of the city and the Trojans.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
And like you just, our EMS system here in the city is a large part of the county system. And when we have a significant patient generator, it is going to affect the entire county medical system.
Absolutely. So I just see there's a number of problem areas with these kinds of events. So,
Pat Boone doesn't cause that trouble.
no, he doesn't. He was down in San Pedro. We had no extra police officers. But I can imagine there's a lot of communities out here in the city of Los Angeles would love that kind of influx of officers on a regular basis. Communities love to see officers in their communities. So, anyway, so we're directing city staff to develop a citywide policy. Who are we putting in that city staff? CLA, city attorney, fire, police. Why don't you come back with a policy? And I guess we shouldn't necessarily say rave events. We should say any event that comes into a city facility.
60 days?
Yeah.
And then do you want any venues? Do you invite any venues you could invite in, whether it's the convention
Well, we have the
center,
convention
Coliseum?
center. Yeah, the convention center ought to be
We're
a
part owner
part
of
of
the
that.
Coliseum.
Yeah. And-
Okay,
but we only have complete control of our city facilities.
very well, okay.
Okay.
But if, let's say they have a rave at the Hollywood Bowl, which is a county facility, LA City's going to be there, not LA County. So I'm just saying, at some time, invite them at least to hear what it is.
Fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Rosendahl has excused himself from class without asking. Oh.
Oh.
Big shot. Okay.
Skip that. Okay.
What's next?
I don't know. What's next? Thank you, everybody.
Item 3, a new lease with Raytheon Company.
Okay. Why don't we approve item 3 and 4? Is that all right? Okay.
With the airport department.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then, okay, 6 and 7. Can we continue those?
What's 6 and 7?
Because we do have to get down to council.
On Tetra, yeah, Mike, could you come up?
Can we continue any of these? Can we continue 6 and 7?
On the ordinance
Why don't you send them to,
Issue on the Tetra contract.
what,
On which one?
7,
Downtown Harbor Design Contract, there's a time issue on that.
I move
What-
approval to
what-
council and then discuss it in council.
We could do that.
Yeah. Saves you
Well,
time.
What's the time issue on 7?
Contract engineering and design work. for-
yeah, it's going to expire on May 31, 2011.
Do we have another meeting before then?
I was just thinking, Ms. Hahn, my suggestion as a former chair of a,
Because there's a lot of this I want to actually talk about in committee. There's a lot about this waterfront that I want to talk about. So
got it.
can we have a? Of course, again, I would say, why would you bring it so late to us?
Well,
I hate these things when you guys bring them to me and expires.
I know how important it is. Why don't we have a special meeting before council?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't want to prove it. There's a lot about it I want to talk about
Right.
it. So are we not having another meeting? You're giving me code.
We may not have a meeting on the 4th, and the next meeting we may also have a special.
Okay. Yeah, because it's 10 o'clock. So we'll continue these 2 items. Okay.
I was just saying, if you send it on to council.
No, there's lots of, no, nobody in council has the stomach for me.
I do.
Grilling these guys. Sorry. There's too much about it that I want to talk about.
I don't like to prove things. Holding it, it'll just automatically